All right, it's 7 o'clock. Is everyone ready to begin? Can everyone hear me at the back? Good. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of Saanich Council to order on Monday, November 16th. We've got a regular council meeting followed by a committee of the whole meeting where we'll address some items. I'm going to invite Councillor Haynes to sit in the chair for that portion. We're going to hear from two delegations tonight to start with, but before I do that, I just wanted to mention that at the EDPA Town Hall meeting on last Thursday, it was overflowing, and we weren't able to hear from all the speakers. And I'm the councillor tonight would like to put a motion forward at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that a second EDPA Town Hall be held primarily for those people who were unable to attend and who did not speak at the first meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Haynes. Discussion on this, please.
I think it's important to recognize that while we may not hear a huge divergence of opinion, it's incredibly important that those residents who did make the effort to come out but had heard from some of our staff at the doors that it looks obvious that we're going to have another one. They chose to leave. Others told me that they could not fathom sitting out in the hallway for 2 or 3 hours and they left. I think it is something that we owe our citizens, and since it's such an important topic that we make the effort to do it. We do it right the first time is my attitude.
Thank you. Any more discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question on this motion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, and with that, we'll move on to the council meeting. So I'd like to invite our first delegation, representatives from Island Health, up to the microphone for a 10-minute presentation. Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Jenny Urquhart. I'm a planner with Island Health, and I'm here tonight to present our Royal Jubilee Hospital Master Campus Plan. The plan has been in process for a number of years, and we're at a stage now where we've submitted it to the City of Victoria for approval. It was approved last Thursday night at council meeting, and tonight is for information. It was part of a master development agreement with the City of Victoria that stemmed from the Patient Care Centre rezoning application, and so we had some requirements that stemmed from that. So, but out of courtesy and also because we straddle both the municipalities of Saanich and Victoria, we wanted to come and do the presentation for you and also acknowledge some of the work that some of the citizens of Saanich who sit on our Royal Jubilee Hospital Neighbourhood Liaison Committee have been attending a lot of our meetings, so acknowledge some of the work they've been doing as well. I understand we only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to give you the highlight reel of the plan and the process to date. Look at sort of the background and the site context of the Royal Jubilee Hospital, looking at our development scenario to 2035, and then talk about some key themes that came out of our consultation with the public. So parking and transportation was a big one, history and heritage of some of the buildings on the campus, and talk about the design guidelines, which make up a great portion of the overall plan. So just to provide a bit of context, the Royal Jubilee Hospital site is known to be one of the oldest or the first recorded hospital in Victoria. It's a tertiary hospital, which means it doesn't just provide services to residents of the Capital Regional District, but also to up and down the island and specialized services to folks across BC as well. It provides both inpatient and outpatient services, and we have a pretty large emergency department at the hospital as well. It is a major employment center in the region. We employ over 5,000 people out of the site. And it also is a training center with the Island Medical Program. So both students from UVic and UBC's Island Medical Program receive training there, and we call it a teaching hospital. As well, our BC Cancer Agency has a Vancouver Island clinic based out of our site. So just to provide a bit of background, so you can see the green area at the top of the map there is where the portion of the campus resides in Saanich. The rest of it is in the City of Victoria. When we went through our rezoning process for the Patient Care Centre, which is DA1, just sort of south of the green rectangle there, sorry I don't have a pointer, basically, it was realized at that time that as the campus grew and developed, there was a need for a clear plan moving forward into the future. So actually at this time, we have no plans to build anything on the campus, but this is a conceptual plan. This is if we do receive funding or there is money in the future, this is the areas or parts of the campus where we probably will be doing development. Let's talk a bit about the process. We signed the Master Development Agreement back in 2008 with the City of Victoria. At that time, a lot of information was gathered and collected through our, actually, I should introduce, we have a, part of the delegation is my colleague Roy Allen, who's a planner with me here, and Mark Crisp, who's with Stantec, who's been the key consultant on this project. Sorry, I didn't introduce you guys earlier. At that time, Stantec did a lot of work gathering information, looking at the data of existing buildings on the campus, doing assessments, looking at what buildings maybe need some renovation or replacement, looking at where there was opportunities for development. The document and some options were prepared, but throughout the entire process, there's been extensive community consultation. And I just want to focus a little bit on that because I think that's really important for everybody in this room, and I also want to take the time to acknowledge that there's been countless hours of volunteer time that's been invested by residents of Saanich in this process. So a public consultation plan was developed at the outset of the project, and the intent of that was to ensure that we engaged with a broad spectrum of various stakeholders in the process, both internally to Island Health, so our staff and some of our key leaders, but also with the neighborhoods that exist around the Royal Jubilee Hospital campus. We are surrounded by a lot of single-family residential, some commercial uses, some other hospital or professional services. And back in 2008, when we signed our Master Development Agreement, one of the requirements of that was to come up with a Good Neighbor Agreement, or a Royal Jubilee Hospital Neighborhood Liaison Committee. And that committee is comprised of Camosun Community Association, which is in Saanich, the North and South Jubilee Neighborhood Associations, which is in Victoria, the Friends of Bowker Creek Society, which is Saanich, and then we have representatives from Saanich Planning, Sylvia Exposito, and one of the actually council members from the City of Victoria comes and sits at our Royal Jubilee Hospital Neighborhood Liaison Committee as well. And so that group became a really great forum and vehicle for us not only to disseminate information out to our community stakeholders, but also to receive information back and hear things about, issues not just related to the Master Campus Plan, but other issues that pertain to the Royal Jubilee Hospital site. So things like parking that's happening in the neighborhood surrounding the site, if there's any issues about Bowker Creek or concerns about noise. I know trees and tree trimming around the helipad has come up as an issue in the past, so things like that. Through the process, we held a lot of open houses, or I should say 3 open houses, as well as a lot of workshops and meetings at the beginning of the process. And at that time, some really clear, important goals came forward to the community members, and we've used those as a foundation for our design guidelines and as a basis for the principles of the Master Campus Plan. So just want to talk quickly about some of the development considerations. Healthcare is constantly evolving and changing, and it's really hard for us to pinpoint exactly what it's going to look like in 20, 30 years down the road. So we do have a department called Operations Research Advanced Analytics, who've anticipated that by 2035, based on the existing conditions and future demographics, we could require up to 650 total beds. We do have about 450 beds in operation right now on the campus. So that's an addition of about 200 beds. And I do want to just reiterate again, this is conceptual, so it could change. We're hoping that we won't need this many. We're hoping that we maybe won't need any at all, and that healthcare can evolve to something more community-based. But for the time being, we have to look at what if, and this is sort of the worst case. One of the goals is to maintain a campus-like setting and ensure that we're not just creating new buildings or space, but also that there's a balance between green space that's really respected on the campus as places for healing and respite for our patients, our visitors, and the surrounding neighborhood. But also that any future buildings that are built on the campus are logically connected to the buildings that are currently there now. A big theme that came up or came forward was ensuring also adequate parking on the campus. Knowing that parking and overflow into the surrounding neighborhood has been an issue in the past. Not just ensuring adequate parking, but also ensuring that we're looking at ways to minimize the parking demand. So things like transportation demand management, which I'll touch on briefly in a bit. So again, I'm just gonna reiterate, just because I think this is confusing when you put buildings on a map, people think they're for sure. This is conceptual, it's an indicative plan. These buildings are where we possibly would place them. And as I said, it's for information for Saanich, because actually all these buildings right now are in the City of Victoria's municipality. So I'll just walk through them really quickly. We've got a central block, which would be our highest density. The Renal and Energy Center, and these are all arbitrary names, over on the Lee Avenue, connected to our powerhouse. We got a building at 4th Street East, and this would have integrated parking as well. And I'm sorry I'm going through it really quickly, but I'm just aware of the time, and I realize that because they're arbitrary, it's probably not necessary to dwell. And anybody, the plan is available as well on our website, so you can take a look in more detail. And a parkade over on Trent Street, which would be connected by a link between, so this would be a pedestrian walkway link between the Eric Martin Pavilion, which is on Lee, and the D&T, or Diagnostic and Treatment Center. We'd also realign that roadway along Coronation in the southern portion of the campus, which right now is a big sea of parking. One of the things we heard from community members as well as our own staff is it's really hard to navigate the campus. Wayfinding is an issue and access. And so trying to create not only better wayfinding and improve access for folks coming in from out of town or from our own communities, but also somebody who wants to walk from the north end of the campus to the south end of the campus, or from east to west, to make sure that they can access it and not have to walk through a sea of asphalt and cars. The parking study was done back in 2010 and again in 2015. I was realized at that time, we looked at not only on-site demand, but also off-site demand, and did a peer hospital review for other sites around the province. And it was determined that we would require at this campus, based on the future development, a ratio of 1 space per 80 meters squared. And that results in about 1,965 spaces. That would be in conjunction with a pretty heavy transportation demand management plan, which we've already got in place. And we've actually seen major successes already with our subsidized bus pass. We've seen increases on BC Transit, as well as bike, cycling, walking, in our overall mode shares. Preserving the history and the heritage of the campus buildings is really important as well. Both the Memorial Pavilions and Adanac Pavilion are considered heritage registered buildings for the District of Saanich, which you probably know. And so we don't have any plans at this time to do anything to those buildings, but if anything were to change or we need to do a renovation, we'd ensure that we go through all municipal, provincial, and national requirements. Our design guidelines are there, and there's quite a lot of design guidelines in the plan, but they're intended to inform the character and overall form of the campus. So things like materials, setbacks, height. The idea is to keep the height of the buildings in the close, or density in the close core of the campus, and then have the lower buildings around the external, so we're not impacting or negatively impacting our neighbors. And as well, the design guidelines will be used for future development applications if we're ever applying for anything within the plan with the City of Victoria and potentially Saanich. So just finally going over next steps, the Master Campus Plan has now been approved, so it's our plan moving forward for the next 20 years. It will be the baseline for our rezoning process with the City of Victoria, and our community consultation and engagement doesn't stop. Our liaison committee continues. We encourage people to actively get involved if they're interested. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from Council? Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, I just want to go back to the comment you said, you may not need as many beds based on community-based support. And I'm wondering if that is actually talking to home support for seniors in their home as opposed to going and taking up a very expensive hospital bed. Is that?
You got it.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's something that we're striving for in the future, is to make sure that we're trying to allow aging in place and let people be in their homes for longer, not requiring the hospital beds and the services that we have, and move more to a more outpatient service model. But it's, as I say, it's hard to predict the way healthcare is evolving and going, and so we do our best to work forward.
Okay, and my last question is, you talked about TDM, your TDM plan. Do you do an annual review, and do you supply it to Saanich Engineering so we could have a look to see how well you're doing? University of Victoria does that. It's just that TDM are so important with big employers, so will you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to date, we haven't been. We've been providing it to we've been doing our TDM strategy, and we've been every actually 2 years we do a report. Right now it's been going to the City of Victoria because it was a requirement of that Master Development Agreement, but there's no reason why, it's public information and it absolutely could go to your engineering department. I would encourage that actually.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Urquhart, for making your presentation today. Is it safe to assess, and I'm looking at some maps on my own on my device here, that majority of the buildings that are in Saanich are relatively new? You mentioned the one heritage. Is that the smaller building right at the corner of Richmond and Adanac?
You got it. Yeah, so on the northwest corner, the yellow building that sits on the corner of Adanac and Richmond, That's the ADNAC building, so that one is actually one of the heritage registered. And then the Memorial Pavilion, which actually takes up quite a large portion of that north end of the campus, is also considered a heritage registered building.
A quick looking at the map would indicate to me that the majority of growth on this site would seem to be on the south side in Victoria. And so while I'm a little, like when I hear Victoria's already approved it, we're still just getting informed, it does seem to me that this is more notice of letting you know, Saanich, because we're not having a lot of intention to build on your part of the property. Is that an accurate assessment?
I think it is, but I do think just in terms of knowing that we went through a pretty extensive process and we did look at Saanich as well is important. Bowker Creek is obviously a huge consideration, and making sure we adhere to the Bowker Creek blueprint and not build right up to the watershed is important, but also that we have looked at doing improvements, and I think even though they may not be articulated on the plan, improving the gateway in the north end of the campus, and also making sure that our buildings are maintained and improved is something that we would definitely consider and continue to do. So just because a new building isn't slated for there doesn't mean that work won't happen.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no more, I want to thank you for coming here tonight and sharing this information with us and our residents in attendance, and of course, as well as engaging our community associations that neighbor this facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we have another delegation tonight. We're going to hear from Dorothy Peterson. Is she here? Someone speaking in place? Come on up.
I'm both going to speak, but I was delegated to start. So, just let me get my. Sorry, this is taking a few seconds. Trying to do two things at once here.
Sure, no problem. When you're ready, we'll start the timer.
Here it is. Okay. I guess you want me to start with my name and address? Is that correct? David Jerrier, 5239 Worthington Road, Saanich. I live in Cordova Bay Ridge, and we have recently become a major flight path for helijets and float planes. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting us. I'm starting with a little quick video. The video here in this case shows, oops, I'm sorry. I'll stop that. The video showed the mossy outline of my roof, typically showing the flight levels. Clearly these aircraft are not flying at the required 3,500 feet above ground level. They fly a narrow corridor through our community, primarily down Worthington Road. We're here to ask for your help because we've exhausted every avenue as to why our community has arbitrarily become a major flight route without any notification or consultation. I agree that airplanes are a fact of life. What I do disagree with is that one community has to bear the brunt of all the traffic without any due process. I have forwarded you a copy of NAV Canada's Airspace Change Communications and Consultation Protocol. Section 1 under purpose, it states neighborhoods and individuals expect to be informed and consulted when changes to airspace are proposed and would alter current aircraft noise exposure in their neighborhoods, and enables residents to provide input. The industry is committed to identifying impacted stakeholders, communicating in transparent, timely, and easy to understand ways. Large-scale projects such as changes in existing flight paths require a robust public participation. This has never happened here. Under roles and responsibilities, NAV Canada is responsible for planning and managing airspace, including flight paths and airways. This clearly stipulates who is responsible. However, getting them to accept that responsibility has proven extremely difficult. Under Section 2, Noise Management, it states airports will be the single point of contact for the public to register complaints. Naturally, here in Victoria, you'd assume that's the Victoria International Airport. Instead, we're told it's the Downtown Victoria Harbour Airport Authority, I never heard of it, who's responsible. However, this authority does not physically exist. NAV Canada stipulates that every airport in Canada provides a website, a phone number, a contact, and a mechanism to register complaints and a noise management committee to hear from residents. These points of contact for the Harbour Victoria Downtown Airport Authority do not exist. It's the only airport in Canada that does not have this mechanism. Unfortunately, this means we cannot access data on noise monitoring and flight tracking or register a complaint unlike other communities. The Victoria Airport only provided us with one contact, Michelle Bishop, Director of Public Relations for NAV Canada in Ottawa, who authored the report I sent you. She has never replied to any of our requests by phone or by email. The report says that airports must make themselves accessible to the community through meetings, a dedicated noise information phone line, and a dedicated email and other outreach programs. None of these tools exist for the downtown airport. It simply does not exist. Under Section 3, making changes, airspace changes, it says, when flight path changes are implemented, adverse community reaction can result, particularly if new areas are overflown. Operators, NAV Canada, and local airports are committed to a public participation process with factual and accurate information before and after a change is implemented. The consultation process will occur when a flight path is proposed. Section 4 states that when a flight path design changes are expected, residents and local municipal governments in newly affected areas will be informed. When flights below 4,000 feet increase by 30% above ground level, not sea level, an environmental impact analysis and public consultation process is required. We went from the occasional aircraft to a major flight path in one day without any public consultation or environmental analysis. The section on audience definition recommends consultation with local and municipal authorities, community groups, and associations. Our attempts to discuss the flight paths with the key players has been unsuccessful. My example, my online complaint to Transport Canada on helicopter noise was replied to by Helijet's Vice President of Operations and Safety, saying, my review included ascertaining whether the flights which did operate did in accordance with all applicable Transport Canada regulations, routes as overseen by NAV Canada and our company route manual. In no instance did I find a deviation from the lateral track routing or any violation of the altitude restrictions imposed by Helijet. This was interesting as it says, Helijet determines how high or how low their aircraft flies. Should this not be a requirement of NAV Canada? He suggested that the Coast Guard or air ambulances were the source of my complaint. However, anyone in our community can recognize the individual aircraft by the noise they make. He refused to provide the relevant sections of the rules and regulations from Transport Canada or NAV Canada, or the relevant sections of his corporate route manual. His response was, I suggest you contact the federal agencies for the information you desire. The company route manual is proprietary, and for me to distribute this manual to you would be inappropriate. How would a federal agency be able to tell me what Mr. Houston used in his decision-making process? Also, his corporate route manual is part of his submission to operate an aircraft, and as such, it's a public document. Here he is functioning as an arbitrator and is governed by the rules of a quasi-judicial function. He's obviously contravened the rules of openness and fairness. This is the kind of response we get from all of them, if we get any response at all. At the Victoria Airport AGM, a woman complained about air traffic over her home near the airport. When asked, she agreed. She was given a disclosure at the time of her purchase of her home, and that it was part of a flight path. And he replied, you were aware you were buying a home under a flight path and paid less for your home. She agreed. No one in our community was ever given a disclosure statement that there was the possibility of our homes were going to be under a major flight path. How is it that a bureaucrat in Ottawa can arbitrarily assign a flight path over our community that never had one? How is this fair when they already purchased their home, paid higher prices and taxes for the privilege of not living under a flight path? I was once told when you come before council, you must know exactly what you want and ask for it. In our case, I'd like the mayor and council to write to Mr. John Crichton, President of NAV Canada, asking that they conduct a proper consultation process regarding the changes in flight routes over our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Pearson.
Hello, Dorothy.
And I took this on for myself just to keep things consistent and right. And I assure you, everything that I have documented, recorded, wrote to them is 100% factual. I have not exaggerated. In fact, it is them who have exaggerated to the contrary, claiming many times that that's not their aircraft. Well, it definitely is. And we really feel we deserve some help. This is the second time a Saanich community has been come before you guys to deal with these fellows. And I would really appreciate that once and for all, it would be settled fairly throughout. If it has to be distributed through the whole city, they actually have unlimited airspace from the water at Harrow Strait all the way to Langford. There's no reason to pick a little tiny street and run a donkey trail through it where you have almost no day of 5 minutes of clear airspace. And we live on a ridge with, as Eric Scott from Harbour Air said, the only thing he had to compare his planes to were the crows in our neighborhood. And I have that in an email. So we have nothing to absorb all this noise. And we live in Cordova Bay because we love to walk around and garden and enjoy our lives, and it's impossible. So we would appreciate some help. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pearson. It's interesting to note that there was, in our package here, there's an agenda, there's a minutes from 2006, and agenda item is noise and safety concerns from float planes and helicopters, that this has been raised with NAV Canada before. There's some very interesting comments in here. One is that NAV Canada receives 100% of the revenue from the airline industry, so they are unaccountable to the public. While that's factual, and I'm listening to your story, it's almost hard to believe that any level of government is unaccountable to the public, but we do get into these situations where they become somewhat deaf to the public. And I think this is an opportunity to raise the voice once again. Saanich has passed a resolution in the past to have a right to a healthy environment. In my mind, this falls in line with this council motion. It doesn't matter to me if this affects 2 residents or 2,000 or 200,000 residents. To be able to enjoy your home in Saanich in peace and having to deal with the decibel levels that are being attributed here is really inexcusable. So I'm looking to council at this moment to ask questions of staff or to engender something based on the ask that came forth from the delegation. Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions for one of the speakers, if I could. See if one of them could come to the mic. From the information you gave us, it's my understanding that this changed in 2012.
It was September 6, 2012.
Right. And have you approached the Victoria Harbour Authority?
I was my first contact from Pestarine, a councillor in downtown Victoria. I was given the name of Wayne Marston from Transport Canada, who was definitely the person to speak to, because he ended up doing a presentation in front of Victoria Council regarding the noise issue in float planes for Victoria. He basically told me there was nothing I could do, too bad, so sad, and then I kept phoning him, and he gave me Eric Scott, VP of Harbour Air. And so trying to talk to him for what seemed like months and months and months was getting nowhere. Then I approached Miss May's office, which I had been approaching the entire time with no answers to phone calls or emails. Then I approached Alana Poppins' office. I also approached Mr. Leonard, that was the previous mayor. you can't help you, you know, not our issue. And then a secretary at Alana Poppins' office started working with me and Eric Scott to try to figure out some fairness. I was basically told when I used to take floatplanes in my previous job, so I only had known north and south were on the water, Heligen, all that. Had no idea that it had happened to Prospect Lake prior. So when we discovered information that this was not the first time, we then approached Alana Poppins' office to ask, well, what's going on, why has this happened? And I was told that they had to protect constituents' privacy. And so, okay, well, what do you plan to do to help us? Basically, we were promised meetings that were canceled. I then found, just by searching Darlene George at the other airport, was also promised meetings, got all the neighbors together, canceled, not happening. I mean, I can go on and on and on. We've exhausted every person. I went to the Airport Harbor Authority meetings. I've done everything, honestly.
Thank you. And it's hard to identify just from the pictures, but I'm presuming these are planes that are, and helicopters that are heading for Victoria Harbor
Yes.
core area.
Well, we get both north and south. We get, and we
Well,
also
there-
get the touring planes.
Okay. Thank you.